So, speaking on behalf of the manufacturers organisation Make UK, I would like to welcome Charlotte Horobin, Membership Director of the Midlands and East of England, for her presentation on Manufacturing Outlook, exploring the latest trends, challenges and prospects ahead, and I'm sure there are many. Okay.
Good morning, and yes, we are the 9th largest manufacturing nation in the world, and quite frankly I could probably not bore so many of you, but at a general dinner party, indeed I can bore lots of people with manufacturing facts. So delighted to have been invited along this morning. My name's Charlotte, and I represent an organisation called Make UK. We'll start off, if we can, by just jumping in a time machine, and we'll go back to 1896. We'll find Queen Victoria is on the throne. We've just opened the first automotive plant in the country. It's in Coventry, and helpfully the government have just raised the speed limit from 4 to 14 miles per hour, so careful as you go there. But on that sort of year, the Engineering Employers Federation was born, so EEF, hopefully 3 letters that many of you will recognise. Now, EEF was formed because the labour force recognised that it needed some representation, and the trade unions were born. And to engage with the trade unions, this Engineering Employers Federation came together. Now, 123 years have passed, and quite rightly, Ed's highlighted what a diverse, broad sector UK manufacturing is now. It's not just about engineering, it's not dirty. And to make sure that we represent the sector accurately, we bravely went through a rebrand in February. So we are the sector body that represents manufacturing. There's 5 big business organisations in the UK, and that is our raison d'etre. You've got colleagues from Bays will know accurately, but hundreds of trade associations, 500 or so, and we engage with them. We almost act as the mothership, really. So we own 2 of them because they're really important to us. UK Steel, it's a fundamental resource to the UK economy, and an organisation called National Defence Industries, which helps small business engage in aerospace, security and defence, because that's quite a hard arena to get into. And again, it's really important to the UK economy. But then we represent the broader trade associations that operate in those niche technical areas that we do not. So today, what do? We advance manufacturing. Now, for you, that will mean different things. For you, advancing might be more sustainable. It might mean having a healthier profit margin. It might mean having better processes and structures within your business. But everything that we do is to champion manufacturing so that everybody knows that actually the UK is one of the great manufacturing nations still on the global scale. Now, we've got about 20,000 members that we represent, so we collect lots of useful information from them, and that's really helpful. It means that tomorrow morning when we sit down with Greg Clark, we're able to give them a really good insight into how the sector is feeling. And when there's really interesting pieces of information, we can then call on individuals to give that really qualitative anecdotal evidence. It's also really handy if you're a lonely MD or a director of a business, how am I doing this quarter? How do I fare against the rest of the world? I think, Chris, you highlighted actually it can be a scary place, and sometimes you've got to look above the parapet. Now, I'm not an economist, so don't worry, we won't be doing charts and scary diagrams for the whole 15 minutes. But I just thought this is a really good representation in terms of output and orders over the last few years. Now, our members in the east of England really felt that pain that you can see there, that downward trend in 2015. Exports had fallen off a cliff in Q3, and the oil and gas industry really had been hit. And we've got quite a lot of suppliers into that sector in the east of England. Now, 2016 came about, we had a referendum result, but actually at the back end of that year, the exchange rate and also the global economy picking up meant that our exporters started to do really well. In 2016 and 2017 saw some really healthy growth. 2018, again, export continued nice and strongly, but we have started to see now, the message is we are still seeing positive output and orders. but there's some peculiar things going on at the moment. You'll see that the output's higher than the orders, and that's because we're seeing some stockpiling activity going on. So this year is going to be a marginal contraction. The good news is electronics, which we've got a good supply of in the east of England, is keeping the sector more positive. But there are some hurdles in the distance. So if I were a smaller business, I'd want to, A, know what they are, and B, think about what else should I be thinking about as opposed to some of the distractions. So, as I said, exports have been doing very well, but they are starting to take a downturn, and that's really driven by the Asian markets and the European markets being a little bit flatter. Mr. Trump perhaps not helping us either. You know, trade wars are not good for trade. We also see really interesting activity around employment and investment. Employment, record lows, well, unemployment at a record low at the moment. But what we find is that when our members are really busy, as opposed to investing in kit, as perhaps the Americans and the Germans would do, they tend to plug those gaps with people. So that then has an effect on the rest of our economy. So some of the key trends from an economic perspective, but really what are the things challenging our members and getting them scratching their heads at the moment? We conducted a number of phone call in-depth interviews at the start of the year, and some of the key things, I won't let you guess what number one was: Brexit. They're prime and centre at the front. So we've moved that aside. But the three key themes that came through strongly: skills, and I think a business of any size is challenged by skills. I can think of possibly 2 businesses in my 6 years of going out and seeing numerous manufacturers every week that have told me that they don't struggle with skills, productivity, and also the challenge to export. So digging under the surface of it, skills, nearly 3/4 of our members have struggled to find somebody over the last few years. They've struggled to fill gaps, and nearly 3/4 actually fear that that challenge is going to persist. We've also got 60% of our members telling us that nearly 20% of their workforce is due to retire in the next 10 years. And with our position with Europe, I think, if anything, all the valves are turning in the wrong direction. So we've got to start thinking about a long-term approach. Now, down in this corner, there's also a very small picture of a lady for the ladies' toilet. But actually women in manufacturing, and actually people from all different backgrounds, ages, ethnicities, we've got to do a better job. Only 5 out of every 100 registered engineers and technicians are women. And I'm always really conscious about this because people think, well, there you go, Charlotte, one-woman band, women in manufacturing. No, not at all. For us, this is about making the sector more appealing and more attractive to people across the board, so that we've got a wider talent pool to fish from, and it makes your jobs easier in terms of recruitment. So we've got a challenge on our hands. Now, part of the challenge is the perception of the sector. Now, this is a slide that I use when I go and talk to schools about being an inventor. I don't go and talk about being an engineer, and I don't take my grey suit either. That's a really important thing. School engagement can be done very badly too. So we do take them through, it's not a dirty, dangerous place, but actually, wouldn't you want to work in this environment? It's the best paid sector that we've got in the country. It's the most productive sector, and it offers fantastic opportunities. So we've got to change the perception. So my ask of you today is please do a better job on social media, your website, raise and champion the profile of UK manufacturing. We should really be proud, and I hope that you'll all be able to quote anybody that challenges you that we don't make things here in the UK. Give them some of Ed's stats, and if you want any more, as I can say, I can bore you to tears on them. What we have started to do, though, is to actually try and give our members some advice. For us, the skills gap isn't just about apprentices and graduates. This is about engaging with schools at the age 5, 6 and 7. Let's talk about inventing. Let's go into primary schools. This has to be a long-term societal change. We often find that the kids are really enthusiastic, but actually the influencers, the parents and the teachers are the ones that we've got to change their perceptions, because they've often got memories of the 80s, and particularly in the West Midlands, MG Rover, there's some really sour taste left in people's mouths. We've got to change the perception of what a modern apprentice is. They're not somebody that makes the tea. We've got project management meetings being ran by our member companies. Purely they're apprentices. They are running those businesses. We've got to make sure that we're helping universities give the graduates those practical skills. Business and academia has to come together. And then there's one final skill set that we never talk about, and that's leadership and management. Businesses and individuals that you recruit into your business, probably technically very good, but sometimes they've not been taught how to manage people. You can't knock them down for it. They've never been told how to manage people. Just because you're technically very good doesn't mean that you're a born leader and a manager. So we often fail to talk about that skill set. So again, my takeaway today, please think about going away and doing some school engagement. It's really great to hear both Chris and Lindsay, as technically small businesses, you're going and doing what we'd expect of a big corporate. So we need more Chris and Lindsays out there, please. Productivity, another challenging area. Manufacturing has had double the productivity improvements of other areas within the UK economy. But there is some truth to be told that we do have a challenge. Now, what we've got here is a comparison between similar economies. So we've got the UK, Spain, Germany and Italy. We don't include France because some of their data is slightly different to compare and not as transparent. You can see on the left-hand side, this is the run-up from 95 to 2016. Now, the pink line shows that the United Kingdom actually is doing pretty well on productivity. But the challenge that the policymakers are concerned about is actually post-financial crash, when we actually just extrapolate that part of the data, our productivity improvement has gone from, on average, 4% improvement every year to just below 1%. So there are some difficulties there, and we've seen across Europe these challenges reflected, but actually other countries are starting to pick up the pace faster than we. Now, in the east of England, it's great news. It's the second most productive manufacturing region in the country, second only to the northwest. For us, that's driven a lot by the pharmaceutical and chemical industries in the area. You can see here, this is a comparison of different subsectors, and although pharmaceutical, this nice peak shows some really healthy growth, there are challenges ahead. So again, it's useful to not just talk about these big ticket items of productivity, but we've got to get underneath the surface. So 5 pillars for us. Underinvestment, I've already told you, we're investing we're not really investing, we're recruiting low-cost labour as opposed to investing, but that comes with a word of caution. Italy and Germany have invested at similar rates, but Germany have by far reaped the rewards better. So invest carefully, don't just chuck money at anything, take advice from the experts. We've already talked about the higher rates of labour content. We've got members who, now this makes me sound like I don't want to create jobs, absolutely not, but we want to create higher level, better paid, high value jobs. We've got a member company. They were struggling to recruit forklift truck drivers. So what they actually did was give their team a challenge to remove that process from their business. And those individuals now have formed their continuous improvement team. So there are different ways of skinning this cat. Leadership and management, when we've sat down with our boards and said, what's the problem with productivity? It was a bit like turkeys voting for Christmas. They said it's us, really. Again, it comes back to that lack of formal training that you come out of university or you leave college as an apprentice, and then we don't often think about investing in employees. When we talk about investment, it's usually in plant and capital equipment. Germany, the US are typically very good. It's a hard thing to measure. How do you measure leadership and management? But those countries, those economies typically have higher skills levels in the leadership and management. In the UK, it's not all doom and gloom, but we've got a broad spectrum, okay? So we've got some very good examples of best practice leadership management, but we've also got some pretty poor examples too. So my advice there is go share best practice. It's one of our strengths because we look after people from textiles, pharmaceutical, aerospace, automotive. Let's go and share best practice in a non-competitive environment to make sure that you can improve your business. Ed's referred to the fact that we've got a changing economy. We've got complex business operations. Actually, pharmaceutical is very driven on purely production and not so much the service element. So actually, that's where we see the productivity sort of strength from that sector. And also company size, bigger is better. So take Morgan's advice and his support and make sure that you're scaling up your business. In terms of export, it's UK competitiveness. As I said, the Asian and European markets at the moment are pretty flat, the flattest we've seen them in a couple of years, but there is good support and advice out there. My advice, talk to the Department of International Trade, work with the Growth Hub, but also seek advice from your peers. How did they enter a new market? Who are they working with? Take those referrals. Now, these are if I were a bookie, my top tips, ones to watch. They are your distractions. They're the hurdles that you need to be thinking about how you're going to jump across. But don't forget there's other things on the horizon. When we take away the biggest concern of Brexit, actually the biggest risk for our members is cybersecurity. We've got technology being embedded in all parts of a business. Go back today and think about how cyber resilient is your business. Could somebody come in and hack your team's passwords? Can they come in and just pop a USB into your reception person's computer? Go and have a look, and the first thing will be to train your people. Culture, productivity. We often talk about things like OEE and sales per head, output per hour, but actually the biggest productivity improvements we're seeing at the moment are about culture and improving that environment in which people work. Most of our members do a lot to protect the physical well-being of their employees with health and safety, but only 1 in 10 look after the mental well-being. And we've seen that it can improve productivity by over 15%. So morally, it makes sense. Operationally, it makes sense too. And then Generation Z. The world is changing. Think about how the next generation wants to engage with you. They like video, they like Instagram, they like Snapchat. Apparently Facebook's out. Using a keyboard is apparently out. Swiping the screen's the way to go. So the world is changing, and we've got to make sure that we're embracing that and that we are ready for that change. By all means, drop me an email if you want to get hold of any of the reports, suggestions of how to engage with schools. Because of my surname, you'll find me relatively easy on LinkedIn, and have a look on Twitter at the kinds of messages that we're putting out there. But please go on our behalf and champion manufacturing, because I think it's a blooming good sector to represent. Thank you, Ed.